Okay, so we're going to start first before we actually start to draw some stuff. We're starting to actually deal with color. We've done our line-based methods, and all of our line-based methods were sort of achromatic. They were independent of color, right? When we had an orange, or we haven't actually drawn an orange, but when we had like a vase that was orange, or we had like a pear that was sort of golden yellow, we didn't apply any color, and we didn't really respond to that color. We just responded to the contrast that created the contour lines. Everything's been sort of contour based up to this point. We're now going to start with color. I have a real short lecture on color. It's like, I think 10 slides, maybe that. I will put this PDF on Blackboard after the fact. That way you can access it if you need. So basically, for us to begin working with value, we have to start first by talking about color. Color is the hue, value, and saturation of reflected light. No color is independent of value, and no value is independent of color. So now that we're starting the value lesson, that's why we're starting to talk about color. We can't remove one without the other because it's all a matter of reflected light. I think it's really important to kind of say that the reflection of light is what affords us color and value. There's this really stupid thing I do in the class where, like, literally I walk over to the lights and I'm like, okay, everyone be looking at the room right now. And I turn all the lights off and I go, what color is everything in the room? It's dumb, but there's no color. Like, on one way, I can explain to you that color and value are all a matter of reflected light. But then when we start to draw, we seem to kind of forget that. So I'll repeat that often. Color is always relative. I like to mention that because we tend to think things have a color. I'm holding a red pencil right now. We like to think that this red pencil is red independent of any light or any space, that it is perpetually red. It isn't. We'll do some exercises when we get to the oil pastel color lesson, where I actually have lights that are tinted red, green, and blue. And if we were to cast a blue light on this red pencil, you'll notice that it will no longer be red because those colors will optically mix, and then it'll be purple or violet, yeah. So color is always relative to light. I am in a very sort of, there's a light right over this way. That's a very, it's what's referred to as daylight. It's a very kind of neutral daylight. You've probably noticed if you've turned lights on in a room, if everything looks orange, that's an orange light. If you've been in a hospital, that's very blue light. A quick diagram that shows us kind of what I'm talking about. One of the first books I had as a kid was like vaguely scientific, and my first goal in life was to do something science related. And then I realized I am extraordinarily bad at math, and science doesn't really overlap with teaching, and I love teaching. And I couldn't learn science well enough to be a science teacher. The way I describe it is like, I knew I wanted to be a teacher before I knew what I was good at. I just had to figure out what I was good at enough to teach. So from my very limited understanding of science, I can remember this diagram, and it's sometimes helpful to remember. The reflected light is what causes a color to happen. There's a real kind of dorky diagram right here. There's a light source. There's all the wavelength of light, because white light, first of all, white and black, not a color. They're not colors. We're going to get there, but the total band of light as it is broadcast from a non-tinted light source, like a standard light, broadcasts the full range of color wavelengths. It bounces off an object, and then we, our artists in our berets, see that color. I know it sounds kind of stupid, but it's kind of important to remember that, because when we take a look at the drawing or the still lifes, especially with oil pastels, we're going to notice that along the body of these elements, their color will change because of the light refracting off of one object onto that object. We'll look at that in our example briefly. It won't be as big of a deal here because we're going to focus mostly on the value spectrum. This is a good example of a value spectrum. You'll find it sometimes where the lightest tone is referred to as 10 and the darkest tone is referred to as 0. I find that to be the most backwards thing I've ever heard. You are working on a blank, sort of a blank sheet of light-toned paper. So 0 is effectively paper white. You cannot go any lighter in value than paper white. It's just, you can't make the thing whiter than the paper is. So if 0 is our paper white, 10 is effectively the maximum application of our implement. If we're using graphite, it's how hard and how soft that pencil is to sort of transmit that graphite. A 4B can get much darker. I think a 4H would tap out right around number 4. So I will refer to lightness or darkness values when we do these demos as numbers. I'll point at something, I'll ask someone, what number is this? Is this like a number 3, or is it number 6, or is it a 10 or a 0? Like, where is it? Is it in the middle? Is it in the end? Is it at the beginning? There are terms to refer to areas in the value spectrum. Roughly, from 0 to 30 is what's referred to as high key. It's high key value. From 40 to 60 is what's referred to as middle key. They're middle tone values. From 70 to 100 is considered low key because they are the lowest range of values. So basically going from lightness to darkness, there's high key, middle key, low key, but they're all referred to as numbers. And I will use those numbers often. When we look at the skull, we will have a conversation about what, if anything, on that object or in the entire arrangement of objects is 0. And conversely, what, if anything, is 10. In the same way that when we begin to draw, we go vague to specific when it comes to thinking about like how to delineate with pencils those objects, we can do that. We do the same thing when it comes to value. We identify its lightest lights and its darkest darks. You start there, and then you start to work in the middle. Otherwise, you're going to get what I refer to as like local value, where you're going to apply some parts of an object to 10 because they're dark. But then when I ask you, well, is the inside of the eye socket of the skull as dark as the shadow behind the grapes? You're going to say no, and then I'm going to say, well, then why did you give me a 10 in the eye socket and a 10 behind the grapes? Really? It's like that. It's like I like to, I think for a lot of students, there's this question about how do you know it is accurate or inaccurate? How do you know it's done well or not done well? And then I'm a little thorough, so I like to explain this a lot. But it's like, this is how we gauge that thing. So it might be good to, at some point, I think I downloaded this. Yeah, I downloaded this PDF. I will upload it to Blackboard in a second. That way, when you start, I'll upload it after this class, most likely. I don't want to take time in the middle of it to do that. But when you begin to draw, reference this value spectrum. I'm going to refer to this thing by these numbers. I usually don't do percentage. Yes. Yes. A student is referring to what's called Vanta Black. It was developed by a sort of engineering, I don't know, some sort of science firm that makes chemical-based products. And the artist Anish Kapoor. Anish Kapoor is on your list. If you've ever seen the image of Chicago with that big shiny thing that they call the bean, that was made by Anish Kapoor. So it's called Cloudgate, by the way, but Anish Kapoor, the guy who made the shiny bean in Chicago, is the guy who worked with them to get the sole use and ownership of the Vanta Black. It's real rad. It's the darkest dark. It absorbs like nearly 100% amounts of light. So we have a value spectrum. And we have a color wheel. You may have heard of a color wheel by now. I'm sure if you did anything at any point with art, you've seen the dumb, dorky color wheel. It's pretty straightforward. This isn't something we're going to focus on a lot yet, but what we're going to do is we're going to take our value spectrum and we're going to take our color wheel and we're going to combine those two things to get what is a more accurate interpretation of color. Remember, color is hue, value, and saturation. It's not just value, and it's not just color. When we look at this value spectrum, it's an imaginary band of value. This is not the way value appears, right? There's no place where there's like, you know, the kilo, the kilogram was a literal unit of measurement held in like a vault. It was a physical object for a long time. There's no physical comparison for value and color. It doesn't exist. It's all something we imagined. And so we can, for us to have a conversation on things that are outside of language, like visual things, we had to make all this up. So no, the value spectrum and the color wheel are invented systems that have faults because we cannot use language to fully encompass how color works. The color tree we're about to look at does a much better, does it much better. So if we look at the basic color wheel, we can see there's a yellow, there's a red, there's a blue, there's a green, there's an orange, there's a purple. We're not going to focus too much on this yet, but what I want you to do is take a second, and when we look at the value spectrum, and it goes from 0 to 10, it goes from lightest to darkest, you may notice that when you look at these colors, they also have a value. They have a value because all color has value. So if we were to take this idea of a color wheel and combine it with the idea of a value spectrum, we get what's called the color tree. It's developed by this guy named Munsell. It's a Munsell color tree, and it looks something like this. This is a more accurate way to think about color. There is an internal column that goes from light to dark, and then it goes from lowest saturation at the middle to highest saturation. Because remember, there's three parts of color here: hue, value, and saturation. We're going to take a look at what each of those means, but the hue, value, and saturation are all contained in this one image. This is a color system that's really rad. They actually sell models of these, which I would love to have. Once I get, like, I don't know, we're not even in person anymore, so having an office full of stuff doesn't even matter. But at some point, I will be in my office and I will own the Munsell color tree, and it will be rad. Because they actually make some that are like magnets, like you can pull it apart and reassemble it. Oh, it's awesome. And 2D Foundations, I would love an assignment that as a class they have to perfectly rearrange this, but it's fine. We'll get there. What we'll notice is if we look at the colors from the color wheel, yellow, red, blue, green, orange, violet, they're all present here, and they exist along this item vertically. From lightest to darkest, yellow is the color with the highest natural value. Sort of red is in the middle, and purple and blue are the lowest standard value. This is in their primary application. In the yellow, as a sort of what we refer to as primary yellow, it is the highest value of all the colors, unaffected by tints or shades. We'll talk about tints and shades after we get to oil pastels, but what I want to get at is every color has an inherent value, and that value can be sort of Ouija'd or ballparked immediately by its hue. Let's talk about what hue, value, and saturation are. Hue is the common name of a color. Value is the lightness or darkness in tone a form is granted from light. It's sort of a complicated way of saying it. How light or dark is it? Saturation is the intensity of the color, and it never fails. Students always have a hard time describing value and saturation because they tend to just lump those two things together. If someone goes, it's a bright color, that doesn't tell me whether it's a matter of value or saturation. So we kind of have to learn these terms well enough to have a conversation. Hue is pretty easy. It's a common name. We're going to take a look at the Munsell color tree and talk about hue, value, and saturation. I'm bouncing around on all this, but hue is literally, this is an area of yellow. It's sort of a cheese pizza slice shaped thing of yellow. If we look at the farthest edge outward that the mouse is currently on, that is the highest saturation yellow. As we go inward toward the column, it is desaturating. It's desaturating because the intensity of that color is diminishing. This desaturated yellow closest to the column is still a yellow hue. Independent of how light or dark or how intensely yellow or how not intensely yellow, it is still in the hue yellow. You'll notice that this is referred to as yellow, this is referred to as red, and this one's referred to as yellow-red. Anytime you get a combination of colors, let's take a look at the basic color wheel. This is primary yellow, this is primary red. This one dead in the center is what we refer to as orange. If you, like, I don't get too bent out of shape in these classes about how we address color. In painting class, no, I will be much more of an annoying hassle about color because we absolutely have to master this. In painting, really all painting is learning how to observe and identify a color so that you know how to mix it. So if we were to look at this color right here, compared to the yellow, is it higher or lower in value? How do you know that? Yeah, you're right. Yellow is the highest value. So you know everything else is going to be lower, even before you have confirmation of that. Your theoretical knowledge of the hierarchy of natural color values tells you that yellow is going to be a higher value. Plus, there's this thing that, like, I usually wear glasses when I teach painting because I wear contacts. So, like, if you wear glasses, like, literally just lift up your glasses and look at it. If you don't have glasses, just kind of squint. If you sort of like, I mean, really, if you squint your eyes real hard, you see less of a specific object and you see more of its blob of color. It's just darker. It sounds stupid, but it appears darker. If we absolutely are not certain, we all have these real magic devices in our phone or in our hands or pockets called phones. When a student has a really, really hard time, or we have a disagreement about which color is lighter or darker in value, convert an area into black and white in a photo. That's the easiest way to check. I will strongly discourage you from taking a photo of the drawing and drawing from that. Otherwise, you're completely missing the component of learning how to identify color. And it will absolutely come to ruin us when we have to do it in oil pastel. So no, when in doubt, and if you're 100% certain, convert an area into black and white in a photo. But if all you do is draw from a black and white photo, you are absolutely going to struggle with color that we do next. Hue is the common name. Value is its lightness or darkness. Saturation is its intensity of a color. These are all what hue? How do you know it's red? If someone were to name me this color, like Yankee Candle style, this top one right here that my mouse is hovering in the top left, like let's say pancreas pink. So like when we experience color, like if we go to Lowe's and we look at wall paints, they're gonna have fun names. If we go to like buy a phone and they come in different phones, they don't call it blue. They call it like cerulean blue ocean or something. Like we commonly experience colors with very, very, let's say, interpretive, creative names. If I were to ask us the hue of this, we would all say red. If I were to ask us this, is this saturated or desaturated? This red, the second one right here, in the top. Is it desaturated or saturated? Is insistent that it is saturated, but I'm pretty sure that there are 12. Oh, doo-doo, I said his name. Crap. Hold on, let me give myself a visual cue. I'm sorry, future me. I did it again. I constantly do this. Crap. Okay, well. So someone says desaturated but dark. So I've got one student saying it is saturated, and one student saying it's desaturated. Clearly, our senators on the saturation levels of this class are at a disagreement. This is desaturated. Yeah, it's desaturated. The easiest test for saturation, which is without a doubt 100% what is going to be the biggest trouble we have in the oil pastel projects, is how to determine if it's saturated. The easiest test, how blank is that blank? How red is that red? How purple is that purple? How green is that green? Of all the tiles, if I were to number this one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, like numbers on an old dial tone phone, in case you have ever been to a bad part of town and seen an old payphone, because I'm sure, whatever, old man jokes about being old. This one right here, this one would be 3, this one right here, this one would be 7. I've numbered all of them briefly. Which is the most red? Which is the reddest red? Which is the highest saturation? Give me a number. Someone says 9, someone says 4, someone says 6. It's tough. Someone says 4. A lot of people are saying 4. Why are we thinking 4? I've got a 3 now, because I've got 3 4s in a row. Because a lot of people are saying this one that my mouse is on is 4. I've got a 6 now. 3 is the most saturated. It is the reddest red. We will have a whole discussion in color where we're going to look back at these, and in looking at oil pastels, I will show us why it is the highest saturation. Essentially, I'm going to tell you now, without showing you with color in oil pastels. This is a red combined with a secondary color. This is a tertiary red. How do I know it's a tertiary red? Because this is a red that is not mixed with white. A red mixed with a white is a tint, as in number 1, and it becomes kind of pink. This is not bluish, and it is not any other kind of tertiary color. This has blue added. Yeah, 4 looks like burgundy. To get burgundy, you take a primary red, because we'll get there in color, but there are only 3 colors that exist. That's it. Red, yellow, blue. That's it. All of them are mixed from there. The red out of the tube is not this. Red in its purest form is not 4. That's how I know it's not 4. We'll get there because we're going to do demos. We'll work on these skills when it comes to the oil pastels, but I want to talk about it now because we're going to look at objects that have a variety of intensities. And what will happen is when we convert this to a color, or when we convert number 3 to a value, trying to identify its position on that 0 to 10 color or value spectrum is going to be difficult. This one's a little easy. This one's like an 8. This one's pretty easy. It's like a 2. This one is going to throw us for a loop because in spite of it being really bright, which is a saturation, it's very intense. It's a very intense red. Just in spite of it being a very intense red, it's relatively starting at a 3 or a 4. How do I know it starts at around a 3 or a 4? Munsell color chart. No color is a 0. None. 2 is around where yellow starts. 8 or 7 is around where blue starts. Everything is between a 3 and an 8. All colors, before they have been unbelievably washed out, which is a term to describe saturation, unless they have been significantly desaturated with a white or with the black, they are still not 1s and 2s or 8s or 9s and 10s. This is a lot of information. That's why I'm recording the part of the demo, and I'm going to put this stuff on the this PDF on the thing. What helps is that nobody said 2. Nobody said 2. Nobody said 7, right? So we have a basic understanding. It's just about, like, you already know about 85%. You know it's not 1 or 2. You know it's not 7. Nobody said the one in the middle. It takes a while to do this. There's our color spectrum again, because it's hue, value, saturation. Here's a good way of showing you saturation briefly. This is where we're going to stop for what we're doing. There's about like 20 more slides that we'll do when we get to color, but we're not doing them now. Here is a blue, and here is a yellow. We know by looking at the color wheel that if we look at blue and yellow, they are not too far from each other on the color wheel. Blue is directly opposite orange. We don't need to know what that term is, but just FYI, that term is a complement. And a color directly across on the color wheel is a complement. When it goes directly across and turns in either way, that's called a split complement. So we're taking a blue, and essentially what we're doing is mixing it with the yellow. When we take that blue and mix it with the yellow, that means this sort of primary blue located here, because this is starting to tint and this is starting to shade, or I had that backwards. Shade is mixed with white, but this is starting to shade and this is starting to tint. This is our primary blue, and this is our primary yellow right around here. This is not as banana yellow. This is slightly more yellow ochre. It's fine. We don't need to know that. If you take my painting class, you're going to hear all about yellow ochre. But we have a yellow and we have a blue. And essentially, as they approach each other in the middle, they start to blend. And we notice that all of these in the middle are what we would describe as gray, right? Gray is not a color. Okay, yes, what? Yellow and blue can make a green. Here's what's going to ruin you if you take my painting class in the beginning. These are incredibly low saturation greens. Yeah, they're desaturated. Why are they desaturated? Because they are two primary colors mixed together. Anytime you mix primaries, their saturation immediately goes down. It's just a matter of how quickly they go down. Again, that's more supplemental when it comes to the color we're going to do next time, and it's the root of painting. But what I'm getting at is when we go close to the center column, this column in the dead center is a set of achromatic grays. I'm peppering the term chroma, chromatic, and achromatic now. They don't really matter for what we're going to do. What we're going to do it, tint is adding white, yes. Yeah, I've got it backwards earlier on. My bad. It's hard for me to watch chat and do all this. Also, apparently Zoom does not like emoji, so I'll assume that box with the question mark is an emoji. I don't know why. Blackboard doesn't allow it either. Okay, rad. When we look at the centermost column, these are sets of achromatic grays. Achromatic literally means A is like without. There's, like apathetic. If you have empathy, you feel for people. If you're apathetic, you don't feel for that person. So A in front of a root word means not. Chroma is literally color. Achromatic means without a color. We are going to draw with value using charcoal, this guy. And when we do that, we are going to produce achromatic grays. Because none of our charcoal has a color. It won't have a color. It's just going to be a value spectrum, lightness to darkness. When we go to oil pastels, which is why we're stopping here, because when we go to oil pastels, we'll pick up, we'll kind of gloss over the things we went over to here, and then we'll go hard here forward. There is no such thing in the world as a purely achromatic color or achromatic gray. Gray, black, and white are not colors. They don't exist. This is a black t-shirt. Because of the ability of this camera to pick up a full range of colors, I look kind of like a void here. I'm wearing a black shirt, by the way, because I'm going to use Vine charcoal. And I would advise you to not wear clothes that you love when you draw with Vine charcoal. I literally teach in a lab coat when we're in person because I've got easels that are covered in paint and charcoal. So maybe get like an old sweater you don't like or just a black shirt. I can wash this and all the charcoal will come out and it won't have like this big hand smear across it. But no, when we look at these, like when we look at the skull, I'm going to ask you what its color is. Its color is not white. White is not a color. Its color is not black. Black is not a color. Even a skull or a wall has a color. We're gonna start. It's usually a kind of yellow. It's kind of a desaturated yellow, but it depends on what does it depend on? What is the ultimate arbiter to tell me what color any object is? The light, yes. The color of the light will determine the color of the object. Okay, that's enough of this lecture. Let me get this down, and then let me get the top-down camera going. I'm gonna... Okie dokie. So, hello, person who... Okie doke. Took painting in high school, can confirm. Yeah, I'm going to assume you used acrylic paint in high school. We will most likely use acrylic paint here. If we were in person, we would use oil. But we will use acrylic here. Acrylic is just as valid. It's just you can work on acrylic at home and not die. Oil uses solvents to clean brushes that are very caustic, and I think it's a concern with like you having flammable things that if you inhale fumes for too long, they can actually hurt you over time. You went to a very nice high school if you did acrylic oil and watercolor. We had one wheel that the stoner burnout threw a bunch of bong pots on. So I'm glad you, yeah, that's rad. I wish I had oil when I was in high school. Okay. Perfect. Let's take a look. We should be seeing a variety of stuff, but we should see sort of a top-down camera with hopefully minimal lag. I know it's not the best. It's always just like not the smoothest because I'm having to do a screen record and send it by Zoom. Know that in post, like usual, I get it recorded directly from the device. So we should see an area of drawing space, which is just slightly off center and it's killing me inside. So let me just move this. There we go. Now there's a little bit better. And we should see our demo still life arrangement right around down here for my people who are seeing this live. So this is our total arrangement of shapes. We are responsible for drawing all of these things as accurately as possible. I'm going to demo first, roughly, how to use these materials. Let me show you what these materials are, because first, before you try to draw all of it, you probably need to know how to use vine charcoal. Vine charcoal, our kneaded eraser, which is our sort of flexible, malleable one. It's purpose-built to be flexible and able to be pulled apart. When it gets extraordinarily dirty on one side, we literally just kind of knead it. When you knead it, it'll heat up and become easier to knead, and then it will be cleaner on the inside. This is useful because it allows us to form our erasing implement into a shape. Remember, we are beginning to erase now, but we are beginning to erase because we're going to use the eraser to draw with. It's not about like erasing. When people think about it, is like, I'm going to make my mistakes go away. We're not really going to do the erasing to make our mistakes go away. We're going to use our eraser to draw into the toned surface. I also have my hard plastic eraser. That's that one that kind of, I can throw it and it bounces kind of guy. I've torn this in half, so it has a very rough edge. I usually tear them in half because, for one, they're too big, and for two, I always have someone in the class who doesn't have a plastic eraser. And then I go, hey, you're going to get a half of eraser when I tear mine in half. So I give someone the other half, and then we can do like the best friend rings at some point and combine our erasers and become Voltron. So this guy's real firm. He's hard. You can't knead him. You can't do any of that stuff. It's real dense. If you were really determined, you can pull it apart once, but it's never going back. So I have my plastic eraser. I have a vine charcoal element. This is about a finger long. It's like one of these Bob's Fine Vine small sticks, small, because this is one and it's full size that I've just literally broken in half because I just come over here and break it in half. It's not luxury material. It's going to be ground to dust eventually. Let's just go ahead and do that. And so I've got my vine charcoal. I've got my hard plastic eraser, and I've got my kneaded eraser. One thing I don't have currently in shot that I will show us after I start to actually draw this stuff is we also need, for this specific project, our, what's it called? Sealant. It's like I forget what I call it. It's basically like the can of spray fixative. That's what it's called, fixative. Yeah, the can of fixative. It's what allows you to spray your drawing so that it doesn't move anymore. Oh, there's one last thing I forgot. Yeah, we need our charcoal pencil. So we've got, yes, the fixative, yes. Because when we're done finally drawing it, what I'm going to show us next week, because I assume no one is going to get done with this drawing between now and Tuesday. If you do, I would strongly discourage you from taking this assignment that lightly. I'm affording you a week and a half. I expect a week and a half of effort. We have our other value materials, which are the water-soluble crayon and a sort of like little brush that holds water. We're not going to use those for this project. We're going to use them for the next project. Because chances are some of you are going to ultimately, absolutely, chaotically hate vine charcoal. And what I want to offer for you is to use the water-soluble graphite, because this is basically like a big old crayon that we can draw with and we can use for accumulated mass value, but then we can use our water brush and kind of do like a sumi ink thing. It's our replacement at home for ink, because if you have a whole bottle of ink and you accidentally knock it over, it's going to be like you murdered a squid, and it gets everywhere, and it never comes out of clothes, and it never comes out of carpet. So we are avoiding that right now. Okay, so now we're seeing our two things in an extraordinary amount of dumb tiled background, but just ignore that part. So our charcoal pencil is filled with compressed charcoal. This is compressed charcoal. This is vine charcoal. When you put marks with the with the charcoal pencil, it is compressed. It is not coming off, ever. It's not coming off. If I were to draw a little mark up here, oh, it does that terrible like nails on a chalkboard. if I try to move this, it bleeds, but the line does not move. If I were to do the same thing over here with the vine charcoal, it moves a lot more. If I were to then try to come in here with a kneaded eraser, I can kind of scrub this out. And you'll notice that this is significantly clearer than that. This is for like a final application. We don't need to start with this. 90% of our drawing will be with this. At most, about 5 to 10% will be with this guy. So I have gone over a lot of how to go vague to specific. I'm not going to focus on going vague to specific right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw one specific object quickly using vine charcoal to demonstrate to you how to do this thing. Is there an object we would like to have drawn? Because my default was just going to be the skull, because that's what I anticipate to be the most difficult. Okay, do we have any other opinions? Perfect. It's like a death metal concert. So I'm going to tone my page. Tone essentially means this. I'm going to apply value to the surface of our page. The only area within this, my mouse is going to be so jet black after this. Like I've started to draw a tiny bit, and every time I touch this, it deposits, and I've got it on my hand from reaching in the bag. When you're doing this, don't, like, some people will do that thing where they like unintentionally rub their eyes. And I always walk around in class, in painting class, and when we do these, don't rub your eyes. Please do not rub your eyes while you do this. If we wear contacts, just give yourself a note. Put a tack on a wall or something. Don't rub your eyes. It's not like you're going to go blind if you put charcoal in your eyes, but you're going to have really smoky eyeliner, and it's going to burn for a while. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the blunt edge of this. No part of this is... you can draw with all parts of this thing. When you're using a pencil, you can only draw with the part that is carved out, right? You can't draw with this part. It's not gonna do anything. This is a complete element of charcoal, independent of whether or not you have Bob's Fine Vine, the superior choice of charcoal. You can have any other kind of charcoal, and it's all gonna be the same thing. It's all just burnt wood. But I am going to avoid drawing with the tip. If I draw with the tip, I get like a line, right? This is a non-line-based way of drawing. We are not going to draw with a line. We're going to draw with accumulated mass value. So I can use the side of this implement. If I were to choose a side, I'm going to choose a side that bows slightly in one direction. Why I'm going to do that is because it gives me a maximal amount of surface area from about here to here that I can rest flat against the surface. And in a few seconds, I can turn this entire sheet into a medium tone. I apologize for the screeching sound, and it's going to move the camera sometimes. When I get that tone down, I can use my hand, and you see this weird like pulpy cheetah pattern? That's happening because it is transferring some of the paper texture. We talked about paper quality in the beginning. Our paper texture is essentially pulp of trees that has been sort of beaten and chemicalized to just oblivion. It's just gone over and over. It's so removed from a tree, I don't even think a tree would recognize it. You can also see, right? Oh, it's just out of shot. Good. Just out of shot right down here, you can see like a bumpy perimeter. If I were to have my drawing board on a surface that is not smooth, you would not be able to get this to a kind of even tone. Is this a perfectly even shade all the way across? No, that's totally fine because we're working on it. If I now, so we can see some areas of paper white. You cannot get further lighter than paper white. I know by looking at this drawing that there is no area that is paper white. The only areas that are paper white are the absolute tiny highlights on the body of the, let me point at it with the mouse, on the body of the sort of vase guy and on the body of these. They're so small that I'm not going to worry about preserving paper white for now. When I get this tone, you'll notice that my hand is starting to get much darker. I start to look like a child laborer in a coal mine in like one of those chimney sweeps, like ye olde style chimney sweeps from like Mary Poppins. I look like one of them. My whole hand is going to be quite dark. Your hand becomes a drawing implement at this point. Areas that have lots of charcoal, you can draw with. Elements that don't have a lot of charcoal, like the blade of my hand, I can remove with. It's about what I refer to as push and pull. This is a very fluid, air quotes, medium. It's a dry medium, but it's very fluid in that it moves very easily. I could come in here and I could like lighten a shape, and if it's too light, I can bring it back down. If I need to give it more darkness, I can come in here and apply more value. This is a very quick and immediate way of drawing. I don't like when students, especially in class, we're not in class, so I guess you can spend as long as you want, but some students get real bent out of shape about making it a perfectly even tone. I do not care about that in the beginning, because all I'm doing is trying to get this page. If I were to think of our value spectrum from 0 to 10, if this page, this corner of the blank paper is paper white 0, what would this tone be? Give me a number. I'm hearing a 5, I'm hearing a 6. Anybody else? I would have to agree with nameless student that I will not say out loud because I was about to and I just had to catch myself. It's around a 4. If I'm not certain, we have to identify its lightest lights and its darkest darks. You are learning this process, so take a minute, and paper white is white. When you tone the page and you move it around, this is realistically your middle value. You're going to be moving it around a lot. If I were to take this and then go into a corner and just... This is around as dark as it can get. Because I can't... Oh, it's getting... I'm going to have to really clean my table after this. This particulate that disperses, FYI, I'm working on one of those like textured, bumpy plastic tables. It might be permanently black for a while. It's not permanent. It will wash out of clothes, but it's going to be a real hard time to get it off of this table. So, like, it's totally fine when these are here. These can be blown away lightly. When we get done, we can lift our paper off, and then this stuff will go away. If I try to move it, I'm just going to end up kind of drawing with it. But, so this is paper white. This is 0. This is a middle value. This is around 4, maybe 3. I think this area is like a 3. This area is like a 4. This is our probably 9. This is not a 10. This guy is what gives us a 10. Let me put an area right down here. We can see that this area, let me get that in shot, this area is darker than that area. That is the quality of compressed charcoal. Compressed charcoal will never be able to give us a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or anything else. It's always just going to be real, real dark. Let me do that in shot. There we go. Real, real dark. So, I'm going to press this as lightly as humanly possible. Is it able to transmit a soft line? Yes. Let me give it a little bit more juice. So if we press it extraordinarily lightly, we can get a light value. But it naturally, with an even pressure, doesn't go light. That's why we're using it as a finishing implement. Even when it's at this darkness, I can go like this. And notice, there it is. My compressed charcoal spot did not go away. This is what I mean. My area of 8 is now maybe like a 6. Right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the skull. And, oh, my poor mouse. It's already dark. Dang it. I'm going to try and make the skull larger without destroying everything I own, because it's quite difficult to do this without using your fingers. There we go. And let me zoom. Zoom. Enhance. So we can get a good eyeball of our skull real quick. I want us to kind of get a good shot of it. Hopefully you literally have the ability to open this in a new tab and look at it while I'm doing this. So I'm not going to keep this zoomed. I just want to take a good look at it real quick because there are things that I will not be able to see when it's this big on my screen. So I want to actually get a good eyeball on it. I'm going to give it my Gowron eye. Okay, perfect. Now let me make this not so large anymore. No, wrong button. Come on, there we go. There we go. Out, out. Unenhanced. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to draw the skull just as an example of how to draw an object. I am not going to draw the arrangement of objects. I will first start with drawing the skull. So because I'm only going to draw the skull, know that my proportions may be, or like I'm not going to like frame everything out first and then add a skull. I'm going to use kind of a maximal range of what's visible here from about there to around here to just draw the skull. That way you can see in its largest size what's going on. So I've just real quickly used the bladed element of my finger that was somewhat light to just kind of lightly mark in the top, my highest point up, my furthest point down, my furthest point left, and my furthest point right. For me to draw this skull, I need to know where his maximum dimensions are. And I'm just eyeballing it. What I'm doing is I'm going from top of the skull, right around here is the highest point up. If you go straight down, the furthest point down is to the left. So highest point up, straight down, a little bit to the left, furthest point left. I think it's too far, it'd be right around here. That's fine, I'm figuring it out. It's a push and pull. I use pieces of my hand. I don't like to erase a lot, honestly. I just use parts of my hand that aren't dirty, and then when I run out of hand, then I'll use an eraser. But I'm using some parts to make it lighter so I can come in here and apply it to make it darker. So I'm just kind of framing it out right now. For the furthest point left, it's around the back of the skull, which would be right around here. And it kind of has that back where the grapes are, which is right around this guy. And the cheekbone is the furthest point out, and the cheekbone is slightly lower, directly left from the back pointy part of the skull. This skull goes furthest point right. So if I go all the way left, I then have to go down to get that cheekbone. I know the teeth come out more, but I'm not going to use the teeth as an example because the teeth have a way of really ruining people. They're so small, and there's so many of them that it's just really odd. So, okay, so I've basically framed out what I'm doing. I can literally come in here, and the easiest way I try to explain this is where it's light, make it light. Where it's dark, make it dark. I advise that we start by making it light where it's light. If I need my eraser, it'll start to remove the pigment from my hands. So if your hands are extraordinarily dirty, just kind of knead your eraser, and it'll allow us to do this. It makes it to where they're less grody. These fingers are still pretty bad. So it's predominantly light on its cap, and it's I got a stupid cable in my way. And it's predominantly dark in its cavity. So I can use this eraser. Let me get it in just kind of a rounded edge real quick. And I'm going to use this sort of rounded guy. And I'm going to kind of erase along the parts that are light. And I'm just kind of lightly using the example of what I just erased into. And essentially, I am just using my eraser as a drawing implement. I know there's a seam, so I'm going to try and leave a tiny bit of that. Where it's light, make it light. Where it's dark, make it dark. There's a dark shadow around the back of the skull that kind of goes like that. So I can pinch this and make it like a bladed thing and then apply a really thin line. That's kind of what I'm doing to get this shadow over here. I start with the lightest lights and erasing into them before I do my darkest darks. When it goes from the cap, my cap line is real funny. My cap line is real funny. Let me try to lightly... I'm just kind of putting that down and like lightly wiggling it across the surface. I know this is arguably line-based, but it's a very thin shape, so it's just going to kind of be that way. And I'm going to slowly just kind of pat it with my finger, make it kind of go away a little bit, because it's not anywhere near that dark. But it helps me to kind of know where that is, and then the what is that called? The thingy that connects, the temple, the thing that connects the side of your head to your cheekbone. And then the cheekbone is kind of like this shaped. We're still kind of using vague to specific to do this. There's a tiny side of the head that goes like this. This side of the face is extraordinarily dark. It's not anywhere near that. And then it's got this kind of like nose bridge guy going on. That is, the top of the nose bridge over here is roughly in line with the back of the head. So if I were to draw one line straight across, it would go from furthest point back of the head left and then slightly up for that nose bridge. So I can go like this. And I know the nose bridge is right around here. And that nose bridge is extraordinarily light. It goes down and then it kind of kicks right out. And it makes a shape kind of like this. Makes a shape kind of like this. Yes, maybe. Yes. Starting to get there. And then there's this sort of shape of the nose where it kind of gets extremely light like that. This lightness of the frame of the nose does not go all the way around. And then this part of the cheekbone on the furthest side out is light, but it's not that light, to be perfectly honest. So what I can do is I can just come in here and really lightly touch this thing to it. And notice at no point am I outlining anything and then filling it in. I'm just trying to pay attention to where it's light, make it light, and where it's dark, make it dark. I haven't done the dark part yet. I'm just trying to identify the lights and sort of temple like this, and it makes this guy's a really rad sort of triangle shape. And getting that triangle shape is going to be important because the top of that triangle, from like this shape that I'm seeing here, the top of that triangle is about halfway through the nose. So I think I've put this slightly too high. But let's get the rest of this in there. Because the bottom of the triangle is about in line with the nose, and it goes like this. And it does this kind of like whoop. And there's the part where the skull gets underneath there. It kind of has a lightness in here. The jaw comes out, and that jawline goes like that. That's about, if it helps me to draw a line, I'll draw a line to locate it, but I'm not going to leave it as just a line, because I can then, it's basically like we did in the beginning where I'm noticing where the line begins and ends. The skull jaw is predominantly in light. And then there's a bunch of grapes, or not grapes, there's a bunch of cranberries. I'm not going to pay attention to the cranberries right now. They're not extraordinarily important to what I'm doing right now because this is so in and out quick that I can come back and draw them later. The teeth bridge comes down, and then there's a real light shadow inside of here, underneath that cheekbone. It's kind of triangular shaped. And the jaw comes in kind of like this, jets back out, but this isn't anywhere near that light. And it kind of goes like this. And the lightest part goes like kind of like this guy. And right underneath the teeth, it gets a thing. I'm not going to worry too much about the teeth yet. So I've done a first quick pass of where it's really light. I notice in the temples, it's lighter also. A lot of the skull is pretty light. No part of the skull is like super duper insane lightness. It's all pretty dark. This is way funky. And now I have a basic sort of roughish shape of what the skull is doing at this point. I can come in here, and now I've done my lights, and I've kind of located where things are. I can start to add the darks and vague to specific, just like normal. We're starting with something that looks basically like a skull, just like we started with something that looks basically like a 2-liter. So there's this really great thing about value. The lightest lights are that light because of contrast. If we look at where the mouse is currently pointed in the sort of eye socket-y shape, or in the gap below the eye socket, it's not particularly high contrast. This is darker than that, but not by a lot. I can use darks to carve out my lights, and I can use light to carve out my dark. I can clarify the shape of this skull real quick by filling in where the shape ends. Oh, I'm going to get so much charcoal in my apartment. It's unreal. So to clarify the shape of the back of the head, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this to delineate that shape. Delineate as in clarify it with a line, but notice I'm still applying an area of value. And it kind of goes like that. Because immediately behind the skull, there we go. Immediately behind the skull is a shadow, and that shadow sort of connects to this guy up here and that guy down there. I'm not going to worry about these shadows too much because, again, I'm focusing just on the skull. Let me lightly pull these out. Again, we're drawing the whole still life, but for this example, I want to show you how to do this. So when I do that, it makes this area look lighter. I did nothing to make this look lighter, but what I did was I increased the contrast from the back of the head to the shape around it. And when I did that, instead of using an eraser to lighten it, I used an area to darken it and clarify that just a little bit more. I'm going to continue to do that a little bit with what's going on. Ordinarily, these drawings are tilted vertically on an easel, and all this dust kind of falls. For me to shoot these examples well, I have to have my glass plate flat. So all of this stuff won't be a problem if I turn my drawing up, and I am going to apologize to my future self because this is going to be quite messy. And I'm just going to do like this real quick, and you can see about how much it deposited, and now it's on there. And I am just going to thoroughly clean that later, just to clarify what we're doing right now, because I don't need that much junk on there. Okay, so now that we've got a basic shape going on, I believe this looks 40% like a skull. I can see where the eye sockets are, I can see where the nose is, I can see where the teeth and mouth are, but none of it looks quite accurate yet. Let me try to add some value. I made the lights light, let's make the darks dark. Is that real fun shape back there. It's not extraordinarily dark, but it is quite smooth. If it's too dark when I put the charcoal down, I can lightly use my finger and sort of lift it back up. It's about that dark. It's maybe a little bit darker. I don't want to spend too long on this stupid little shadow. There's this like hook thing on his head that's real small that literally keeps his skull cap connected to his head. I'm not going to worry about that yet. Why? Because it's tiny. It's tiny, vague to specific, big areas to small areas. I want to draw it because it looks fun to draw. And that's curved way too much. Or its position in space is tilted too far up. It's more like pointing to 1 p.m. rather than like midnight. Okay, so there's that guy in there, and then we have this area of darkness right under here. It's pretty simple, and it sounds dumb, and I'm going to change it a lot, but where it's dark, make it dark, and where it's light, make it light. There's an idea of line pressure. If I press this charcoal with an even amount of line pressure, it makes a very straight, dead flat line. If I alternate my line pressure, which literally just means I press it hard and I start to press it softer and I press it hard and I press it softer at random intervals, it will give me a kind of a slightly nicer looking line that appears more natural. I'm just pressing it hard and then light and then hard and light. And it gives this kind of this like wavy gravy thing. Doing that line pressure makes it look a little bit nicer and it allows you to kind of control the thickness of it. I'm literally taking this thing and then laying it against the brush, and when I need a larger shape, you may have noticed it started to curve because I'm wearing some of it off. I lay it more parallel to the paper and more of that charcoal contacts the surface. When I tilt it back up, it makes a thinner line. So to get this kind of like Massachusetts shaped tail, I literally just started with it flatter and brought it up. So it's a lot of like line control and implement control, which is just like practice, honestly. This is one of those lessons where how much you touch the paper is really going to matter, because if I go like that, you'll notice the finger, and if I go like that, you'll notice the finger. So Remember what fingers have charcoal? I usually keep some dirty and some clean. That way I can kind of like doop, doop, doop. And then this shape is slightly lower. If I touch on this too much with my finger, I will deposit oil. So try not to touch on the area you're drawing with, because when I do that, I don't want to demo it because it's what I don't want you to do. But if I put too much oil on here, it won't deposit charcoal particularly well. And then there's like a kind of, this jawline is real wonky. You may notice that I periodically add a line to delineate, but I don't leave that line. I kind of disguise that line by drawing back into it. Please do not just leave me raw, uninterrupted lines. Okay, so there's this eye socket is going to help a lot. Let me get that nose socket. Let me get these eye sockets. I try to talk about what I'm doing to make it helpful, but I realize after a while it's probably just annoying. It's probably just better if I just draw. It's extraordinarily dark in here. And it goes real steep. It's a real hook. It's just a push and pull. If it's too light, pull some off. If it's too dark, put some down. There's this. I can really lightly blow on the surface of this and make some of that charcoal that's falling off go away. Come on, put that line down. To get that really specific line inside the nose right here, I will probably need to come in later with my charcoal pencil. I don't think I'm going to be able to get a lot of that now. Let me I can lightly tap this eraser against the surface and lighten it. There we go, that's a little bit better. Again, I am trying to draw this on a surface drawing that is around half the size that I ask you to draw, so getting finessed elements in here is sometimes difficult. This is pretty good. It's not too bad. It's not too great either. Oh, come on. Okay, let's get some eye socket. In the same way that I delineated the back of the head with some darkness, I can come in here and do the same with, it's extraordinarily dark. I can do the same with the eye socket for the nose bridge. It kind of goes, has a slight bump, slight ridge bump, and then it goes kind of upward. And that's much too steep. Because if I notice left to right, if I were to put a pencil right here and go straight up, this bend is slightly to the right of it, but it's not quite that far. And this peak is nowhere near that sharp. And yes. Do all the darks together and then do all the lights together. Do not go object to object. If you go object to object, it's going to be real difficult. Literally all the darknesses touch one another. So that will help. That'll help a lot to kind of get that dark to dark, light to light. I hope I can do this one kind of slower and then have some time to do the other one where I draw all the objects kind of quicker. It's that thrilling watch a man draw technology. I know it's kind of a pain. The amount of times that I've touched this area, you see how it's getting splotchy? I'm depositing a lot of the oil from my hand. I might need to just erase this in real quick. There we go. I was using a blank part of my finger that didn't have charcoal in it. It was just kind of putting some goopy down. There's kind of a triangle shape through here that goes from point of the nose, kind of like this. And it connects with the darkness underneath here, and it connects with the darkness down here. And where this triangle ends is where the teeth begin. And let me carve out this side of the jaw and try to clarify where the teeth end. You may notice that as I keep adding little bits to this thing, it's slowly, because I'm having to talk and draw, starting to look more like the guy. But I didn't start right away with it looking exactly like it. And then this is kind of a really dark line. Doing a lost and found contour where it appears like a kind of near straight line going from inside of the socket to the nose bridge. It's not a dead straight, evenly the same value all the way across line. Having that difference in value across that will help it look a little bit more natural. That's probably good. And it's just passes of adding lightness to make it light, adding darkness to make it dark. And after I do these, I'll come back in and I'll finesse the lights. And it does this kind of I think that's too high, honestly. Yeah, it needs to be a little bit, or too low. It needs to be a little higher. There we go. And then let me clarify this real quick. When you put a lot of charcoal down, most of it will come back up when it's vine, so it allows you to put this kind of like large shape. And if I know I need it to be slightly darker up here, I can just pull that charcoal from its darkest area to its lightest area, and it will help kind of naturally gradiate. It won't make a perfect gradient, but it will help us kind of go like this. And because I'm pulling from its area of lightness to its area of darkness, it kind of gives us, it's starting to give us a rather lovely gradient. And then it will kind of do the same thing up here. So before I added these kind of like specific squirrely lines, I try to get that area of darkness within there. This damn thing will not go away. I'm going to leave that for now just because it's not the end of the world. And then it kind of does one of these. I know I'm worrying about these little bitty lines, which are quite small, real early. I'm honestly doing them a little earlier than I should. But if it's wrong, I will erase it. And it's not the end of the world, because we do this exercise in class where if we were to work on this in person and you had a hard time and it was drawn wrong, I would literally ask you to wipe away your drawing and try it again. I don't do that to be cruel. But if you did it once, you can do it twice. If you're having a hard time and it's extraordinarily difficult, you can literally just wipe it all away and start over. Until you fix it, it is movable. Okay, and let's carve it. I said I was going to do this a minute ago, so let me do that now. There's this thin, teeny, tiny edge around the eye right over here. I want to kind of carve that out by first lightening this area. So I've got a bladed point. Let me kind of... And it's not quite that thick all the way through. So what I can do is I can come in here, and when I apply my darkness, I notice that it is narrowest right at the top of the nose. So right around here, it almost appears to disappear. And I can come in here, and I can thin out that line with the darkness. Where it's dark, where it's light, accentuate it with darkness. Where it's dark, accentuate it with lightness. All of this side of the face is quite light because of contrast. So I need to up the contrast through here to clarify that shape. And let me make sure and do this right before I do it wrong. There we go. That's not quite that pointy. Okay, that's a little better. So I know this is not the fastest thing in the world, and it's probably not the most thrilling and entertaining media you've ever seen, but hopefully this is starting to make sense. Ah! There's that squeaky noise. Let me see if I can do the rest a little quicker. Forgive me if I don't explain what I'm doing, because I'm going to try and speed it up. Too thin. If you're going to try and use gloves instead of your bare hand, know that if they have that weird like dusty stuff powder, that dusty stuff powder will probably prevent it from moving in the beginning. So just like put the gloves on and then like literally wash your hands with the gloves on, and that'll help wipe away some of that stuff. I think it's like baby powder, but it's like that kind of shape. And then the teeth, which are nightmarishly, catastrophically difficult for students to do, and I have to stand a little bit oddly to do this. I cannot draw while sitting. It just does not work, so I always have to stand, and I'm going to try and carve out. This is where the teeth... I'm looking at the relationship of where the teeth start versus where this dark tag is. So this is... Oh, didn't mean to do that. So from that dark tag all the way here, this is where the teeth start. He's got them teeth that kind of jut out. And I can carve an edge of where the teeth sort of end in space. Instead of starting by drawing the teeth, I can draw where all of this sort of happens. Because if I notice... Please don't interpret it. You're more than welcome to make your own version. But what I'm noticing is from where the teeth jut out on the gum line, that point is further left in space barely than where the jaw kind of comes in for the chin. And then that chin angle is quite steep. I have to breathe on it very lightly. And it's quite a pointy chin. And then I'm just going to kind of carve out the bottom of the chin. It's not quite that pointy, but it kind of angles upward, and looks like it kind of goes like that. And then there's some cranberries over here, so I'm going to kind of just... There we go. So I'm starting to work on the skull. It's been about 40 minutes. I don't want to spend forever on this, but let me try to get these teeth in there, because the teeth are quite difficult. So what I notice is there's this dark shape. What you don't want to do is draw the teeth as just like a shape that goes like this and then go like this. That is not what teeth look like. Because if we look, there are no dark lines between every tooth. What we have are very soft transitions in value. So instead of thinking of a tooth as having an outline and drawing that outline, think of it as an individual value and draw that value. Where it's darkest is on this sort of gum ridge that goes like from this point all the way down to that point. And it starts kind of like that shape. No, it's a little bit lower. It starts kind of like... It'll almost look like a funny mustache in the beginning, because until I put those teeth in there, it doesn't really make the most sense. Okay, and we got that gum ridge, and let's put, most of these teeth are a lighter value, so I'm going to get my kneaded eraser, and I'm going to knead it to be a kind of blunt. I'm not going to make it extraordinarily pointy, but I'm going to make it sort of like a molded blunt edge, kind of like a, let me put that in a high contrast. There we go. Kind of like that kind of guy. And let me see if I can get these teeth, because this tooth, these two are sort of the lightest values along this range. And the lightest values start at the edge of that triangle. And I'm not going to draw tooth by tooth. I'm going to draw where the teeth are the lightest. And they're not quite as light over here, but they are lighter. So let me just kind of lightly dab this guy. And that last dude kind of juts out. The contrast is a little too great right there. Contrast too great, so I dab it off. And now that I have a band of value, I can kind of locate where it's at. And I think my teeth were a little off, but that's fine for now. They're slightly too long down here, so they kind of come upward. They get much shorter. And then they approach this kind of dark shape where the kind of like back molars don't touch. But there is a lighter molar on top. It's not extraordinarily lighter. So I'm just going to lightly dab that. Just dabbing it on there. We'll take a little bit off at a time. And let me put that gap back in there. Because I'm trying to find where the overall shape of the teeth begin and end before I try to like actually draw any of those teeth. So if it sort of starts here and it ends there, and I've started to lightly, what is happening with that phone? It's just like so much spam. I notice that the line break where these teeth don't touch is lower in space than that where they begin. So this point goes all the way right and down, and it kind of follows this trajectory. Let me not do that. And before I do the top, so I've got this, oh, don't do that. I've got this area of lightness right over here that I've identified. I'm going to do that same approach with the bottom real quick, because if I notice, all of this is quite light, but it's a narrower band on bottom. Why is it a narrower band of lightness on the bottom row of teeth? Fancy me a guess. It's because the bottom teeth are under the top teeth. These front teeth kind of buck out, and they buck out covering the lower teeth, casting them in a shadow. There we go. And then let's kind of make that a little darker. Let me come in here, and there's this area of teeth that are kind of like that. There we go. Not quite so much. The teeth underneath these fronts are quite darker. I'm not going to try and make too much of it happen, but I'm going to try and get it most of the way there with this, because this is only going to be able to get so specific. And the rest I can do with that guy. Kind of. Above every tooth is this kind of like triangle shape. If I draw that line and it's too aggressive, I can tap on it and lighten it. And that first tooth does not buck out anywhere near that hard. Oh, and I just shortened it too much, dang it. There we go. What we mostly see is where the teeth begin to separate at the top with a kind of triangle shape. It's not a whole bunch of other information. And it's definitely not one continuous line through the whole dang thing. from the teeth. The teeth are basically like the shape where it starts on the left part of a tooth about yay big, and it's slightly darker on the bottom left corner, and it gradates to the top right. So I've just kind of lightly tapped my finger in here to give it some value, and it starts to give that tooth a tiny bit of curvature and space. So they're starting to look flat, and they're starting to look a little bit more round. If I want to clarify some of these teeth some more, I can come in here and clarify the light edges. I'm resting my hand against the page, but I'm resting it down here out of shot because it won't affect the drawing. And this little teeny guy way out here, this last tooth that's barely visible, is so barely visible, but I do want to kind of try and get him in here. Something like that. So we're starting to see teeth form. They're mostly there. I'm going to leave those top rows of teeth like that for now. And let me kind of add some stuff for the lower teeth. Do you recommend... Oh, my bad. Yeah, you asked that question. My bad. It's kind of hard for me to watch chat while I draw. But if you have questions, you can totally interject, as I may not hear immediately, as someone just experienced. There's a little dark V shape where every tooth sort of begins and ends. And then that last tooth has a real aggressive break where it looks like there's like a gap in space between these teeth that poke out and these teeth kind of recede in. Like I've said before, his jaw doesn't really rest perfectly flat. And then let me darken this area. Ah, dang it, wrong implement. Ah, dang it. I erased when I was meant to. That may happen sometimes. And then it has this kind of like weird, darker shape down here. All I'm noticing is that it's like darker down here. So I'm like, well, what kind of shape is that? This is kind of like a vague triangle shape. So let me just kind of like add a triangle shape. Where it's dark, make it dark. Where it's light, make it light. I go, well, that's too dark. So I can come in here and I can lightly tap it, make it a little bit lighter. And then it does this kind of like, I mean, it is a little darker than that. There we go. And it kind of comes up and it has like this weird dimple right over here. And dark. There we go. That's a little bit better. That dimple's a little too dark. But on that dimple, there's a light zone that kind of goes like that. And then there's a dark spot in the center. It's not quite perfect, but it's getting there. And this darkness is a little bit more light over here. And then that darkness peels all the way up, and it kind of has this peak light band immediately underneath these teeth where it's real light. And we can see where these teeth are because of the darkness underneath them. There's no such thing as sharpening charcoal. This is just raw wood. You may notice it was real flat on the end when we started. It was like this. And now it's like this guy. It'll naturally, the more you use it, begin to round out. If you want this to be flatter, like let's say I want this shape to not be so blunt and I want it to be like this guy, I can literally just do this. And then now, look at how blunt that is, or how sort of angled that is. Yes, you can. Sandpaper may obliterate your charcoal. So get a really high number sandpaper, like a 400 or a 200. If you use a 180 or a 60, it's just you're gonna have a pile of goop on the floor. But yes, they actually sell those like dorky like sanding pads where you can sharpen it. I don't particularly like those, but it's personal preference. So let me add just a little bit more info for this tooth back here. And this tooth right back here. Okay, so I've drawn on this for about 50 minutes. It's just around an hour. Yeah, you can see the time right up here while I draw. So we can start to see what's going on. I've brought the teeth to probably the most clarity. We can see individual teeth, right? We could argue like how many teeth he's got from my drawing. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, maybe an 8 and a 9 and a 10. Am I going to sit here and count teeth on your drawing versus the still life? No. If you give me 4 teeth, he's got way more than 4 teeth. So like this area is at a good level of resolve. I don't want to draw forever because ultimately I want to give you time to draw. This level is, this area is at like a pretty good level. It's not quite done, but it's getting there. And this area is probably the least resolved. When I do this demo, does this approach make sense? Like, do we have questions about how to actually do this? Yeah, I can add some berries that are on the side of the skull. It is all the same idea. It's where it's dark, make it dark. Where it's light, make it light. But let me show you what that means. I added all this darkness to clarify that skull. I need to make that go away. There we go. Now it's mostly away. So the first set of berries happen right around here is where the sort of first one happens. I'm just going to add some value where those are. And then I'm going to finesse those values after they're all roughly down. So there's one here, and it kind of comes down. It makes this big like sort of like V shape right here. I'm just going to draw the larger shapes of darkness to the smallest shapes of darkness. So there's a big shape of darkness, and then it kind of connects down here. There's the other leaf, which is right around here. That leaf kind of follows like at that point, and it connects to a shadow down on this guy. That shadow goes like this. It's barely in shot at this point, so I'm going to stop going quite so low. So that shadow I'm drawing now is basically this guy right here. And then there's the gaps between shadows that are actually quite light. So there's a shadow right around here that does like this action. And it connects to a berry. That berry's like right around here-ish. Are all of my berries the same value? Nope, definitely not. That's too big. So, but I'm going to start by giving them a value, and then I'm going to finesse those values, because right now what I'm trying to do is figure out where they exist. I'm trying to do their placement, and then I will worry about their relative value. One partly eclipses the jaw. This one's kind of olivey color. Just kind of like that. And a lot of these circles overlap because I'm just trying to get basic shapes. And then there are some sticks that connect things. And then really, like, this whole area is in darkness. This whole dang thing is basically in darkness. It just kind of pokes out for one berry right around here. And then it pokes out for another one right around up here. Because if this area is mostly in darkness, I might as well just draw it mostly in darkness. There's no point in going like one berry at a time. So I end up with like a big old mass. That's where the accumulated mass value comes in, is where it's dark makes it dark. Because there's this light shadow right in here, or this light area. I could just make this whole thing dark and then erase into there to get that shape. And it'll make it a little bit more clear. And then there are leaves. The leaf on the right doesn't quite touch the head. And it's a little lighter. It's sort of a medium tone. So let me see if I can touches this darkness. And it kind of goes like that. Because the shadow right up here is very dark. And that shadow ends right around here. Which means everything within, everything within this zone is quite light. This camera is going to rock quite a bit when I do this because it's on a crane arm. Okay, and then the leaf right around here. It's got like a ripply edge. I've added a little bit of that ripply edge, and it's got these kind of like light veins in here. I'm not going to worry about those light veins, but I'm noticing that it's lighter, so I'm just going to draw some basic shapes like that. That one's too big by a lot. And then it's got this part of the leaf that curls up and goes right, which is real dark. Still has the ripply edge. Yeah, that noise is going to be quite unbearable. It will happen quite a lot. So it's all the same vague to specific. Yes, I will, but no, it's all the same approach. It's where it's dark, make it dark. Where it's light, make it light. After a while, me showing you won't help. I just know that because it's much easier for me to have you attempt to draw it during open studio time. And when you try to draw it, help you with those problems. I'm glad the videos help, but those videos, like you're talking about, Ramon, help you when you're drawing it and I'm not around. I'm trying to preserve some class time today so that we can actually try drawing it while I'm around. That is the premier, best way to learn that is more analogous to the way we would learn it in person. So there's some leaves. You can see the basic leaf shape happening here and here with these two. And it's extraordinarily dark in here. Let me get those light shadows, or the lightness between the shadows going on. And when I draw the shadow, the edge of the shadow down here, I can also add the edge of the berries. Yeah. 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 Okay. Yeah, I just want to clarify just a couple of these berries because this one down here is very light and has a shadow. These two are very dark and that one's not as light. So let me get these four in there real quick because he's got like a really lovely example of value and he's barely in shot. Let me try to move this a little bit downwards. Oh, my poor phone. You're going to be so dirty after this. There we go. There we go. So he's in there and he's got a shadow that comes off of him that's real aggressive. And he's got a little reflection of light back there. And then he's got this one teeny tiny peak of light. And I'm going to get this thing like a needle. And I'm going to get it as pointy as I can. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay that needle point right where it's supposed to be. And I'm going to kind of wiggle it and dab it and lift it straight up. Just make it pointy, contact it to the surface, jiggle it a bit, lift it up. And now we have, let me get my charcoal pencil in here and let me clarify this dark shadow. Yeah, the light is reflecting off of the table and then bouncing slightly back up on this guy. So that's sort of one cranberry resolved. And let me get the dark buddies on the left and right. This one right up here touches barely, and he is quite dark. Because there's only so much you can do with this guy. This sort of dude can only do so much, and then the rest of it's up to an eraser and the charcoal pencil. But let me get that in there. I can clear up his edge with the kneaded eraser by making it real pointy. And there we go. And then the top of the shadow is right around here. And then he is extraordinarily dark. And he is most visible where he ends and reaches another berry that is not quite as dark. So there's that dark berry. Let me delineate my lighter berry a little bit. Okay. Okay, it's a little higher than that. And my dark berry, let me accentuate that edge. Charcoal pencil. I'm doing this charcoal pencil because I am just committing to where this position is for the sake of this demo. And same routine as normal. Make them like a needle point. I'm going to touch them right against the tip. And I'm going to kind of lightly dab off and on to get a large area that's lighter, because he's got an area that's lighter. And then I'm going to hit him with the highlight. Real pointy. One time on, kind of like dab it, pull it off. Boom. My highlight's probably a little too large and a little too contrasted, but now we can see that there's one berry right here. There's one berry right here, and they are different values because its total object shape is different. We can see a little bit more about the top of this guy because of the contrast of a dark shadow behind him. Again, this charcoal pencil is meant to like clarify. So these two berries are starting to have a real completion about them. That's just what's happening. This guy is not a full circle because he is not fully visible in this environment. He's behind a dude that's right over here that I can give like one of these. And now we can kind of see him a little bit better. So, perfect. All right, wall texture time. I'm going to imagine that this area is wall for the sake of this demo. It's not wall in the drawing. All of these are like relative to one another. Again, it's just vague to specific. Where are the berries? They're all over the place, but they're mostly in this large black mass. So I did this big black mass, and then within there I'm starting to locate where each one is, and then as they are located, clarify them. Wall texture. I'm going to do an area right around back here, right above the top of the pot. And for me to do that, let me just kind of add quickly like top of the pot. The top of the, you can use a sponge. Anything that helps remove some stuff so that you can draw it a little bit better will work. Yeah, they used a really nappy roller to put this down, and it's so god-awful, but it's meant to like hide like pinholes and junk. So I'm just trying to add the basic shape of where the pot is. And I noticed that the pot, or the jug spout is quite dark. And then it's got these like vertical bands of darkness. I'm not going to spend forever on the jug, but the jug is close to the area I am attempting to draw. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this in here and I'm going to start to carve the edge of that jug. Because most of our wall is pretty light. It's not quite paper white, but it's middle value from its, like, I'm not looking at its darkest darks and its lightest lights to give it an approximation. It's pretty, like this area, if I squint, is like a 3, maybe a 4. It's not quite dark. So it's closer to our toned page to start with. And what we have are lots of little irregular shapes that have light cast upon them. And when light is cast upon an object, it follows conventions. I did the cranberry first. Why is there this area of lightness in our cranberry? This guy, why does this exist? Where so you're saying the light's coming from over here? So the sun ray, or the light beam kind of goes like this guy, and then it hits our cranberry, and it casts the shadow on the opposite side of the cranberry. Knowing how the light affects objects is really important. The easiest way to learn that is to look at the drawing. The drawing, or the still life has all the answers. Every answer to the still life is on the image. We can learn a lot about like the way that light works on objects, but ultimately the easiest way to think about how to draw these still lives is where it's light, make it light, and where it's dark, make it dark. I've just added a little bit of stuff to the top of our jug just for fun. Okay, so the light is coming from up here and it's going that direction. So every single one of these textures kind of looks like an irregular camo shape. Let me see if I can do one way over here large to kind of demonstrate what the heck I'm talking about. If I were to draw one of these kinds of shapes, what you're drawing are essentially the dark spaces between light spaces. Let me do this kind of larger and tell you what I'm talking about. So there's a dark element, and these dark elements are very irregular. If you know kind of how the wall texture begins to appear, you can start to draw it. This is the darkness between forms, which means that this kind of squarish shape is one of our like blobs. Blob is the term I guess I'll use right now. And if light is coming from this direction, it is going to be at its highest value on the side nearest that direction. And it's going to be at its darkest value immediately opposite the light. And now this starts to appear less flat and it looks like light is hitting it, so much so that light is being hit first here and then last here. And if we do a couple of those, we can make it kind of look these are quite large, but it gives us like a difference where it looks like it has a different like height in space. Because essentially what we're seeing is a difference in height. And if I try it once and I don't feel good about it, I can wipe it away and try it again. Yeah, you can totally draw where you don't use the eraser to make it light and you just sort of use the paper tone. There are many ways to do this, but essentially all I'm trying to do is where it's light, make it light, where it's dark, make it dark. I think that's a little bit too aggressive value-wise, so I'm going to slightly dab it, because it's not quite like stucco. I know it will be very difficult, but more than anything, I want us to try it. I know it probably will not be perfect right away. If it's extraordinarily difficult, it's okay. It's not gonna be perfect, but I want us to try. Because you will begin to tell me kind of how the light is affecting these shapes and how you draw it. Also realize I'm doing this this is my hand. This is extremely small. It will be slightly easier for you to do it. More than anything, what I'm getting at is if we look above the skull, there's a seam that goes straight up in the corner of that wall right around here. Ultimately, within some of this area, it's not going to look like much of anything, but we get some larger shapes right around in here that start to do like this guy. Try to give it a texture. It's basically like a snaky, lost and found lightness to darkness. But there's this thing about like drawing that I think people forget. I mean, I know I talk about it being like a studio, but it's like I usually use the metaphor of a language class. This is like a language class. I can tell you how to say hello and introduce yourself. And if you never practice it between classes, when you get to class to do it for a grade, it's not going to sound very nice. If all you do is do it once when you do it for a grade, it's probably not going to look very nice. It requires some practice. Coco said genius. I don't know about what, but yeah. So does this make some sense? Am I going to be psychotic and be like, your wall texture is insufficient? No. I want us to attempt the wall texture. What I don't want us to do is just to leave it totally blank and totally even from wall left to wall right. Wall left basically has almost no texture. Wall left is a much lighter area. Like if I were to draw that difference between wall right and wall left has an area that is like mostly in light. And right on the other side of this coffee guy, there's almost nothing going on. Way out here, we get like the outline of very large shapes that kind of do like that. It's not a tremendous amount of stuff, but if anything, it's harder to do because it is so subtle. I want us to practice subtlety. So like this is starting to do some of the stuff that it's doing over here. I could come in here and give it a little bit more finesse because I know in areas it's a little bit darker. And the areas where it's a little bit darker tend to be lower. There we go. That's a little bit more, right? Because what we're trying to demonstrate is that we know how to take the full range of colors in our example and compress the hue, value, and saturation into just value. Sponge for wall texture idea. If all you do is touch a sponge to the wall, here's the thing, your sponge will not change its size. You can attempt to do it, but the texture on the wall in this top right is not the same scale and size as the texture of the wall on the left. There's a greater concentration of the wall texture as you get further in space. These down here appear larger because they are literally more forward in space toward the camera. So no, if you try to use like a sponge to do this stuff, it's not like it won't help, but it's not like it's going to be your one answer where you just go dab, 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 done. Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I just want to put a disclaimer on that, because what happens is if people don't like, it's like some people used rulers for their linear perspective in spite of me telling them not to use a ruler. So it's like, no, not you. I said your name again. Hold on, let me get the thing. When I do video playback, if I notice this, it'll help me identify where I messed up. Yeah, well, this is for the video, not for the desktop recording, so that will help some. But yeah, no, if it helps you draw it, it helps you draw it. That's all I care about. But just like, you know, I would love to fully resolve this during class, but I know after a while it doesn't do any good. It's already 10:20, by the way. So there's a tiny bit of time left. Do I have any questions about like how to draw stuff with charcoal? The shadow kind of goes like this. And then it kind of goes like way out here. The best part is you can put really big areas down real quick. And then there's like a pair in here. I actually really like vine charcoal, but I'm going to end the recording at this point. And I'm going to clean up my station because this is pretty dang bad. But let me get this. Okay, perfect. Let me get this recording stopped.